Well, well, well. Look what we have here. It's like a quad box next to me of goofy individuals, people that I love very much and are very near and dear to me. I'll introduce them in a moment. We're doing hello. It's Saturday, July 1st. It's noon Eastern time. I'm Bob Harris. It's the Football Diehards YouTube channel. Normally, this is our weekly Ask Me Anything session. But we're shaking it up a little bit and doing a Scotfish 13 mock draft because Scotfish 13 is coming. And it's going to be glorious. You can still ask me things. I'll try to answer, but I'm more likely to get to the SFB-related questions in this one. Quickly, Football Diehards is the website. Go there, use the promo code Diehards to get 15% off. Your choice of magazines, premium content, all that kind of good stuff. And much of it provided by some of the fellows sitting next to me and some other people in the draft. So we'll get there. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell here on the YouTube if you haven't already. If you previously completed those YouTube-ish tasks, you know the next step. Hit the like button or the dislike button. I'll hit that now just so everyone feels comfortable with it. We like the honest feedback, people. We're all about that. Now to introduce the drafters that are joining me today in the upper, what do I want to call that? Right-hand corner. Jamie Calandro wearing the Cheers merch for his Scott Fish Bowl. Jamie will be drafting in the 3 spot today. Eric Romoff in the lower corner. Also joining us from Football Diehards. He will be drafting, what is it, the 10 spot that I see, Eric? Is that correct?
I am in the 8 hole.
8 hole. Okay, fair enough. John Laub in the upper corner there next to me, smiling brightly. John drafting in the, which spot, John?
Number 10, which I'm also drafting in the Scott Fish Bowl.
And the great Matt Donnelly from DynastyVipers. I saw him do one of these yesterday. I know what he's up to. Matt, how are you today?
I know.
I'm doing good. In fact, if you remember, I made sure I drafted Tyler Higbee just because I knew you were watching the last one I did.
You
so
son of a... You're evil. Tyler Higbee is fast becoming everyone's favorite late-round tight end. We have some other people from the staff in this draft. Evan Tarracciano will be drafting 1st overall. Emil Kadlec will be drafting 9th overall. And some usuals here in the chat. Mr. Scampers will be at 2. He will be in charge of chicanery today. I call it scampersing, in which you go join a mock draft and you do all kinds of crazy stuff to see how people react so you'll know what's going to happen in your drafts. And you're probably doing it from a different spot. Scampers is the sneakiest cat we love. We love him very much. Game Overboard also in here with pick 105. Scott Kobe, the great high-stakes mastermind at 1-6. Jim Furry in the draft as well as 7. Andrea in at, 11? And Royal Slade, our favorite Canadian fireman, in at 12. And so we'll get this thing rolling in case some of you are out there wondering what the hell a Scott Fish Bowl is. Well, it's interesting, people. It's a little different. It's kind of unique. It's a 3,300 team, basically a large field tournament. There's 275 leagues with divisions of 12 teams. It's a 22-round draft. We'll get through as many as we can today. The scoring is abundant. There are lots of points, the lineup requirements, and it's a tight end premium. I'll get into that a little more as we go along. The lineup requirements are you can start 2 quarterbacks. 2 quarterbacks, 7 flexes. Is that correct, you guys? Kicker, if you want. On Sleeper, you have to have a kicker. Half the leagues are being played, or some portion are being played on Sleeper. Some portion are being played on My Fantasy League. But My Fantasy League, the kicker is a bit of a, you can do it or not. I think Matt Donnelly has thoughts on that. In Sleeper, you have to have a kicker. But the scoring is what's interesting, you guys. And I just want to, throw out there some of the numbers from last year compared to this year. This is put out there by a Twitter contributor. Let me credit that individual because it's a great job and very helpful. AWL Sabermetrics posted this link out there, and it just kind of runs down some of the scoring positions. And it's interesting how much different the scoring is this year than last year, I would say. You're looking at quarterbacks. I want to say last year's quarterbacks, the average difference in scoring is 205 points on the season. So that's an average of 12.9 points per game at the top of the range for Josh Allen. He would have scored 27 points a game last year, 40 points a game this year. The top of the running back heap would be Josh Jacobs, an additional 10 points this year. So you get the idea. We're going to start the draft rolling, and we'll kind of get everyone's approach and take on how they like to do these things as we get into it. But, and if you have questions, throw them in there. Happy to hear what you have going on. Morning, Slade. Morning, everybody. Thanks for jumping in the chat. Pigskin Panic, Chris B. Who else is out there? Brian Larkin, Charles Davis. Albert's out there. Mr. Scamper's out there ready to scampers on us. big fan of quadrants, is he? Evan Tarracciano, of course, in the room as well. Evan, if you want to jump in and answer some questions, really appreciate it. Best Ball Fantasy. Wendy Early, good morning, everybody. And so let's get this thing started here. We're rolling away. Jalen Hurts, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, all going off. You're going to see this going quarterback heavy, and it should come as no surprise. Let me just start with you, John. Your general approach to this draft, how eager are you going to be on the quarterbacks? What's going to be your focus here?
First, I want to say I feel like we're doing the Brady Bunch version of the Scott Fish Bowl. For all of us old people out there, you know exactly the reference that I'm talking about. I am going to probably be drafting quarterbacks heavy early in this draft. I played in the Scott Fish Bowl every year. Whoops, I'm up on the clock, so give me half a second here, my good friend. Let's see, I got to figure out how to draft. I did it.
Fields and Herbert are off. By the way, first non-tight end, non-quarterback. It is a tight end premium. Justin Jefferson went off in the middle of the first round. That seems a little bit unusual to me, so we'll go on from there. Trevor Lawrence. So go ahead, John. Continue.
I played since 2005, which is this is my 9th season, and the years in which I have as well I didn't draft quarterbacks or they got injured. And there are just no quarterbacks on the waiver wire. I mean, once in a while, Nick Mullins popped up. Last year, Brock Purdy popped up. So you might get a quarterback late in the season who could help you. But, man, if you are starving at the quarterback in this draft, I'm up again, so I'm looking now. Ooh, I'm going to go a little bit different here. I took my man Bijan Robinson in Atlanta in the second round because you do get a quarter a point for carries. So I do believe, and by the end of the season, Bijan should lead Atlanta with a minimum of 220 carries by the end of the year.
Yeah, we'll be bringing the screen back up, the draft screen up here momentarily. The scoring is 6-point passing TD, 1.1 points per completion, 0.1 points per first down, 1 point for 25-yard passing, 2 points per 2-point conversion, 6-point rushing TD, 6-point receiving TD, 1 point for 10 yards receiving and 10 yards rushing, 2 points for 2-point conversions, 1 point per first down. This is big, you guys. I think people are paying attention.
Oh, yeah.
0.25 points per carry, also 1 point per reception. Tight ends, extra point per first down, extra 1 point per reception, kicking, special teams, all that stuff as usual. So we're rolling along. Let me get to you, Jamie, and your general approach in this draft. You started out with Patrick Mahomes with the 3rd pick overall. Not a huge surprise.
Yeah, I'm almost up here too in Matt picks. So I put my choice in for 3. 3 is where I'm picking in the actual draft because those top 3 quarterbacks, Hurts, Mahomes, and Allen, are, I've kind of made it where it's really nice that I can. Hold on, I'm up on the clock for a second here. I'm going to take my guy Barkley. Matt's already sniped me on Jonathan Taylor there, so I'm going to take Barkley. And with the points per carry thing is big. So I've been going hero running back after that first quarterback as well. But being in the 3 spot, I love the top 3, the security of Hurts, Mahomes, and Allen. I think with this scoring system, you can make the argument that Lamar Jackson is also in that tier. The other thing that's kind of changed for me as I've gone along here is I picked my spot before the scoring rules came out, and it's so tight end premium heavy. I Josh Allen in my rankings just because Josh Allen's bye week is in the SFB playoffs. So I'm still toying with that as we do these mocks and how much that's actually going to matter to me because Allen is such a good pick, especially with the lack of penalties that quarterbacks get here.
Yeah, there are no negative points here. And by the way, it is a 3rd round reversal, and we'll discuss that. So if you notice that backwards and you're not familiar with this, that is why it's a 3rd round reversal.
Yep, and I see in the chat, too, that kickers get 3.3 for a point after, which is true, and I've strongly resisted kickers in all forms of these drafts, but that may have to change this year.
Well, it's not just those PATs. If they kick a 41-yard field goal, it's 4.1 points for the kicker on that. So it's all at 0.1 per kick, and then you have to use that yardage. So a 50-yard field goal, you're looking at a 5-point swing for a kicker here. And that definitely changes the game, especially when you look at all these extra flex spots. Bob alluded to the no negative. So you see guys like Josh Allen and Dak Prescott who have more value this year than they had previously because both these guys had a history of throwing picks, especially Dak Prescott last season, who threw as many picks as he threw touchdowns. Well, you could pretty much negate all of that. So this is basically a kickback to, I think, Scott Fishbowl number 9 when it was like this video game scoring, but now there's nothing negative that comes with it. So, I mean, you're laughing with these quarterbacks. This would be like a Jameson Winston perfect scoring system.
All right.
Negative year, wasn't Sam Darnold who threw 5 interceptions against New England and he had like minus 25 points that week? That was brutal.
Was that the famous scene, Ghost Games? Eric, as you sit here and you roll into these drafts, what's your general approach?
Yeah, so I'm not drafting from my actual spot. I'm a 12 when we are all said and done. So kind of feeling it out here from the 8th spot, but overall really just trying to take advantage of some of the changes to the scoring system, right? I am more comfortable waiting for my second quarterback because there aren't those negative points for mistakes, right? Some guys that were kind of fringy last year, you remove their interceptions and their turnovers and they're kind of right there in the middle of the QB2 middle class, right? So definitely more comfortable, pushing the envelope a bit with my QB2. And also as evidenced by my second and third picks, trying to take advantage of the point per touch scoring with volume heavy running backs, right? So going with a bit more of a robust RB type of build, at least in the mocks that I've done thus far.
I think that's what I've seen the most of. Go ahead, JB.
Matt has sniped me twice with that exact line of thinking here so far in this draft, so I'm on it too.
Right, I think this is like been the build. Go ahead, John.
Oh, that's why it's also Bijan Robinson and Nick Chubb. I just want those weeks where you're getting 20 touches out of both of them, so you have such a high floor in those weeks.
Right, so I think this is, the builds that I'm seeing here, they're pretty normal. Evan's build in the 1 pick, 2 quarterbacks in the first 4 rounds, but also 2 wide receivers. You're seeing a lot of that, but I am seeing more of the running back heavy builds. The build that I've seen, that I've been using, I'm drafting in the 11th spot, and in the mocks I've been doing, I've been getting the same thing Royal Slate is getting at 12, McCaffrey, Andrews, and then a quarterback using the 3rd round reversal. If you're drafting late, how big a deal is that 3rd round reversal for you, Matt?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, you can basically gamble on not taking a quarterback at that point because you're getting the top end of the 3rd. If this was the way it was previously where there was no reversal, you'd almost have to force yourself to take that quarterback a little bit earlier. So instead of getting Mark Andrews there in the 2nd, he's probably going to have to target a quarterback because there's nothing possibly coming back at that point for him. So if you're in the back end, this reversal is absolutely huge. It gives you a little bit more flexibility where you can wait on the quarterback. Whereas if you're picking at the beginning, you almost have to take a quarterback with that first pick because if you don't grab one of those first 2 picks, you're probably not going to get a quarterback anytime soon. So it really does change the whole strategy here where it almost forces the early part of the draft to take a quarterback where the back half of the draft has that ability to kind of wait on the position a little bit more.
Jamie, I feel like that's the key to all this is how you handle the quarterbacks and as you outlined the benefits of having these high volume running backs and receivers to a degree is going to be important. How comfortable what's your comfort level of waiting on that second quarterback and does the fact that you're going to be waiting make it a little more vital to get one in the first round?
Yeah, I think, unless you're talking about the end of the draft, like you guys were just alluding to, where you can actually have that luxury of waiting a bit. I think it's very important to kind of do what we've done in this draft and snag one of the top 8, 9, 10 quarterbacks as your first pick. Before this, before Scott Fish took away a lot of the penalties for quarterbacks, I was pretty bent on making sure I wasn't leaving the 3rd round without both of my quarterbacks. I think there's definitely, like Eric said, a lot of luxury in waiting now. I almost did it a 3rd time. I almost took a 3rd running back in that in that 4-3 spot, and I almost took Najee Harris there as well, just to see what I'd get as the fifth quarterback. But I just thought Aaron Rodgers there was too much of a value to ignore. With his new offense and the Jets, what I love here, and I'm probably going to be drafting this way. I think you do have the luxury of waiting though till rounds 4 or 5 this time, where you wouldn't ordinarily have.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think in these mock drafts, you want to try out some various strategies. Or get past John. I wanted to ask you, how strictly are you adhering to what you want to do to see how it's going to play out versus maybe a little experimenting in these mocks?
Well, I do like to experiment, but when I'm doing like a video show like I'm doing right now, I like to give the viewers exactly what I plan to do, my strategy. So when I decided today I'm going to draft that quarterback and go quarterback heavy. Now, if I was just, in one of those sleeper drafts with people I don't know, I will experiment there. But whenever I have someone watching or reading, I always want to give them 100% of what I plan to do. They don't have to agree. They don't have to follow, but I want them to be able to say, hey, this is one method, and, this is what John is using to do it. So that's what I did here.
Yeah, and besides, we've got Mr. Scampers to obfuscate the draft, and he always does a great job of those things. Eric, in terms of, what's your, we see your start here. You've got Justin Fields, 2 high-volume running backs, 2 really big play wide receivers here, it looks like. Is this going to be similar to your general approach, or is there enough variance? I think the thing that I've seen is, you don't know who you're going to be drafting with once you hit the draft, right? It's a mix of a wide range of people and playing styles. Is flexibility going to be the key in reacting to the draft, or is trying to stick to your strategy going to be a primary goal?
Ooh.
Yeah, flexibility is always key, right? And that's evidenced by my draft so far, right? Like you mentioned how much the texture of the draft can change based on who's in there drafting with you. And there have already been several guys, Kyle Pitts, Russell Wilson, players that I'm accustomed to targeting a little bit later in the mock drafts that I've completed that have gone not long before I was planning on drafting them, right? So for me, whenever that's the case, usually I try to see if there's a position upcoming tier break. Clearly, based on my last 2 picks, wide receiver is that position for me, right? I felt like if I push that down the road any further, I would be in a significantly lower tier. So had to pull the trigger there. And now, I've probably done about 10 SFB mocks so far. This is certainly the latest I've gone without a quarterback or a tight end. So kind of splashing around in some uncomfortable waters, but this is part of the fun, right? You want to see if you change your course, how does that team start to come together? And I'm relatively happy with how it's compiled. We'll see how it looks when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I start getting quarterback claustrophobia. I guess you would describe it as like when you watch an MMA match and you're like trying to help the guy, it's all on the bottom, all tied up. You start twisting around and feeling like feeling all angsty. I'm getting that way in some of these drafts that I've been in. Some of them have played out exactly as I want. Like I would say the 12th pick where Royal Slate is picking has worked out for me at the 11th spot really well. I've been doing a similar approach. We'll see what he does at quarterback here. But as we look across the board, there are 2 teams, I believe, with 1 quarterback. 4 teams with 1 quarterback. And I wonder how far there goes Bryce Young to make it the second quarterback there at the 12th pick. We'll be interested to see the levels of discomfort. What do you think, Matt, is going to be the latest you're going to want that second quarterback? Matt, are you muted? I think you might be muted.
Yeah, I'm not muted. I got like 9 kids upstairs running around, pitter-pattering.
Okay.
It's down up there. But I think for me, when we talk about the quarterback position, I don't want to wait any more than the 6th, maybe the 7th round to get that second quarterback. I'm like you. I start getting a little claustrophobic, and then I look, we're in the 7th round right now. I look at the quarterback position, Kyler Murray. I don't know when I'm going to get him. I don't know when we're going to get him. I don't know if we're going to get him this season, depending on where the Cardinals end up at by the time he's healthy enough to play. So that's going to be a question for me all season long. And then I look at some of these other situations, other quarterbacks that we currently have on the board right now, C.J. Stroud, great, fantastic rookie quarterback. Are his weapons going to be enough to make him productive in his first year? Brock Purdy, Trey Lance. San Francisco is telling us who the quarterback's going to be, but yet no one wants to believe San Francisco, and they keep asking this question. Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, more questions about them. Can you really rely on these quarterbacks to be your number 2? They're great as a number 3 option, but like John was saying earlier, when you hit the waiver wire in week 3, week 4, week 5, there's no quarterbacks there. You're praying for Gardner Minshew and his jorts to somehow make an appearance somewhere along the way in the season, or Jacoby Brissett to step in and take over for Sam Howell. So you're looking at it right here, and you're like, I'm looking at the guys with one quarterback or no quarterbacks or whatever we're looking at. I'm looking at the quarterbacks on the market. I'm like, this is not something you can go into your draft with Mac Jones as your number 2. You're going to hope – you might as well play a kicker. You might as well grab Justin Tucker right here and put him in your super flex because he's going to give you more production than a guy like Mac Jones.
Yeah, I think I commented in the chat, I don't really see Kyler Murray suiting up. I don't know that I do either, honestly. I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but it certainly won't be negative. And Gator makes a good point in the chat. With no negative scoring, it makes the rookie quarterbacks have a little more appeal in general. I think Jamie's got the 2 quarterbacks, got Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Mr. Scampers is on the 1 QB. His comment in the chat was splashing around uncomfortable water, but to the tune of rocking around the Christmas tree. We'll see what he does with this pick here. That'll be kind of interesting to see where the quarterbacks go. There's a question in the chat that I think is really important, so we'll go ahead and let Jamie. We'll start with you, Eric, on this one. I kind of see this as almost like a large field tournament. What is the importance of taking chances?
Yeah, it absolutely is, right? 3,000 plus entrants. So, the way that it's formatted, you originally need to best your division of 12 opponents. But in the grand scheme of things, total points is going to be how this tournament is decided. So very much so, there is a premium and an emphasis on swinging for the fences, right? You have to find guys that are going to carry a bit more risk, but also there's some upside to your team.
I got Matt Donnelly loves what's going on in the draft there, and I think that's the case, right? Let me go to you, Matt. What do you think about the big swings, and are there players you're interested in taking some big swings on?
Well, Tyler Higbee's a guy that I just drafted right now because I know you're going to draft him before I get another opportunity to do it. So I made sure to grab him.
I'm not even in this draft, and I'm going to draft him.
Yeah. No, you're going to find a way. You're going to find a way to make sure he doesn't end up on my team. That's how it has worked in the last, I think, 4 or 5 drafts that we've done together. You've gone Tyler Higbee, and he is one of those guys who's moving up. You've been able to get him in the 9th, 10th round, but you've got to take your chances. If you play it safe, you're not going to find yourself in the final 10 when it's all done. You have to differentiate your roster because, you might get out of your division with drafting safe and grabbing this and that, but when you go against the top players, we hit the semifinals and your finals, there's going to be so much difference in these rosters. You're going to have to find a way to set yourself apart, whether that is stacking a running back, a quarterback, and a wide receiver, or throwing a tight end in there. You're going to have to find a way to make your roster different than everybody else's. And if you follow the consensus, if you follow the ADP, you're just going to have the ADP of the Scott Fish Bowl. You're not going to have that differential roster compared to everybody else. So you have to find a way to make yourself different. And I think that comes down to drafting your guys when you need to draft them. If you have Darren Waller as your tight end 2, you need to draft him as the tight end 2. You can't wait to grab him in the 5th round, 6th round as a tight end 5, tight end 6, because now you're giving someone in the 6th round that extra advantage if you believe that Waller is that tight end. So if you're going to swing on your guys. Go with your gut. Go with what you believe in more than anything. You have to find a way to differentiate that roster.
Yeah, I mentioned 3,300 teams, people. It's a lot of teams. I mean, you've got to get to the playoffs, but once you're in the playoffs, you've got to battle. There is median scoring in this as well, so that's worth noting in addition. Maybe we'll get into that. Scott Kobe, who has been doing a little stacking in this draft. If you look at his roster right now, I believe I saw him get Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. We'll see if he gets anyone with Kenny Pickett there. But he wanted to know how important you guys think stacking is. I'll go ahead and start with you, Jamie. And what's your approach there when it is stacking? Is it something you're doing earlier? Or are you waiting a little later and doing it more organically, or how?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm kind of using it as a tiebreaker. I'm not putting all the emphasis on it. But you guys have been mentioning. Oh, it's my pick here. My Q got obliterated that that round. So I'm picking here.
Go ahead, take your time and make your pick. I'll come back to you. I'll get to John on this.
Well,
I'm
about to stack my quarterback
ahead.
if you want to keep me on the board here. So
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just took Tony with the 9th round to stack with Mahomes here. And that was kind of an example. I had another receiver that I was going back and forth with, and I kind of took him as the tiebreaker because it does complete the stack. And, you can almost call this tournament like a glorified best ball, even though you set your lineups where, the upside of a stack, if it hits, is what's going to kind of keep you in the upper echelon of these tournaments. It's not a 50-50 cash game in DFS. You need to be at the top. So, and Mike Evans was my other receiver that I had there with Tony. So, that was a good example there of kind of forcing the stack, but it's not something that I, move a guy 10 spots ahead just because I have his quarterback. But I do think it merits a little bit more in this than in just a standard redraft league.
And I think the Mahomes-Tony stack is an example of one that, to me, is organic and might have huge upside. Like, I don't think the Chiefs want a wide receiver one, but I think if they're going to have one, I don't think they care if they have one. But I think if one emerges, it's as likely to be Kadarius Toney. If they've said as much. And so that brings up something Matt said. I saw the Cooter Doodle tweet that, San Francisco continues telling us what they're doing, and we just all sit there and go, I wonder what they're doing. And they are literally telling us. We'll see if Scampers continues to push the QB envelope, but much to the chagrin of the people in the chat and this draft. John Laub on the stacking. What is your approach, sir?
I had to get one quarterback wide receiver stack in all my drafts. In Superflex, I don't have to do it with my second quarterback, because if you have a bad day from both quarterbacks and both receivers are bad, I don't want to put that much risk. So in this draft, I opened up with Trevor Lawrence, and in round 5, I think it's round 5, I ended up taking whenever I've gotten Trevor Lawrence, I have stacked him with whichever receiver comes at a lesser cost, either Kirk or Ridley. Emil just took my third quarterback I was eyeballing there. So I want Howell for my third quarterback. Let's see let me think. I got my Q. It's not obliterated, but it's not as deep as I had hoped. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to prevent Josh Allen's stack. I'm going to take Gabriel Davis here because I do like him. He's coming at a great value compared to last year. What are we in the 10th round? So I'm very happy to get Gabe Davis in the 10th round.
I mean, in Gabe Davis's defense, he's preventing his own stack right now the last couple seasons. You don't want to draft Gabe Davis. But when you look at it, we're finally getting Gabriel Davis right where he is supposed to be here. Right now, this is exactly where Gabe Davis is supposed to be drafted, not where he was going last season. This is where he's always had to be going. You are what you are, and this is exactly what Gabe Davis is.
Yeah, he's defined himself.
Yeah, I like the value.
And here we thought he defined himself in that playoff game 2 years ago, and we all drafted him like that last year. And how'd that work out for us? Moral of this story: have a little bit more data before you start spending big on wide receivers. We'll see how all that plays out. So we're looking here. Got what? 1, 2, 3 teams with 3 quarterbacks, so things are going to start getting tight. Still a team with only 1 quarterback. That would be Mr. Scamper's team. He is doing that on purpose, and he loves doing this in these drafts. And look, so this is something, maybe you could talk a little bit about, Matt, the wide range of possible outcomes. We're sitting here mocking. I felt really comfortable with a number of my first mock drafts, and I got into one about a week ago that totally put my thinking, turned it on my head. How much should I put stock in that one draft, or how much should I be ready? How many plans should I have in place as I head into this draft?
Well, I'll tell you right now, when we're looking at these mock drafts, I would put pretty much 0 stock in these mock drafts that you're doing right now because it's fun, it's great. But when you look at everything right now, when you get into your league draft, it's not going to be anything like you are predicting. When you are throwing analysts and fans and fanlists all into one room, something crazy is going to happen. Someone's going to draft a kicker in the 4th round. It's going to happen. It happens every year. Someone does something Maybe they even take a Barkley that happens to be a quarterback in the first round instead of Saquon Barkley. These things happen in the Scott Fish Bowl. So you have to prepare yourself for everything and anything. So it's good to have a plan. It's good to have an idea where you value players, where to take them roughly. But there's going to be players that drop for no reason. There's going to be players that people reach on for no reason. So when you look at it, I mean, having a plan is great, but you're going to get punched in the mouth at some point, and it's going to be how you react after that and adjust to your strategy moving forward.
I want to say it was Shane Manila who I think for charity took Matt Barkley instead of Saquon, wasn't it? Was that? Do I remember that?
The problem is someone else actually drafted Matt Barkley thinking it was Saquon Barkley with the second overall pick. And then Shane Manila basically said, anyone who drafts Barkley and makes the playoffs, I'll do something for charity. I'll donate X amount. I can't remember what it was, but then Manila did it as well. He drafted Barkley. He put his money where his mouth was, and that's kind of where that started off. But you're going to see something crazy happen in one of these drafts, if not more.
All right. So let's go ahead and get a couple questions from the chat. So when you're drafting Tua, do you feel like you owe yourself a spot? You owe a spot to Mike White on your roster at some point? Start with you, Eric.
Not necessarily to Mike White, right? Where I've drafted Tua and I have plenty of Tua exposure, I do put a greater premium on my second quarterback, right? Or in this case, a third quarterback, my contingency plan for if Tua gets hurt. So, you know, the Mike White handcuff concept is fine, right? In a tournament like this, any quarterback that's going to start will have value, but the reality is I'm drafting Tua for upside more than anything, right? So if it's Mike White in there, upside is gone, and it's really just a contingency plan at with my alternative plan, then just getting the snaps that fall to Mike White.
All right, and that I agree with that. By the way, Mr. Scampers finally got his second quarterback, so Tua Tagovailoa in round 2. Then in round 12, Ryan Tannehill. That's like the best case outcome, Jamie, is it not, for this approach?
Well, in theory, it is to me, yes. We're going to allude to the other conversation that we just had too. I'm a notorious anti-Tua this year. So I have almost zero of him, and I know I'm in the minority of that. But yeah, if you're betting on his upside that you're taking in that second round and you're waiting that long, getting Ryan Tannehill in the 12th round is about as good as you can do, because you should be pretty confident that you loaded up other place. You can see Mr. Scampers went very tight end heavy in this one. I think that's the key. If you're going to take that risk of waiting on quarterback, you better do the tight ends. Or go like extreme RB heavy in this one. So I think he's doing a good job with this thing. It's definitely not how I would have drafted, but I like his team.
I will tell you this: it's definitely not how he will be drafting either. But that's neither here nor there. It's always good for these exercises, and I think it's always fascinating, how we have to react, and and how it makes me think a little bit outside the box. Looking at some of the builds here, I mean, I do see some tight end heavy. That tight end heavy approach is wise. A few questions before we start looking at some of these teams and giving our thoughts on them. And by the way, I'm Bob Harris, Matt Donnelly, Jamie Calandro, John Laub, and Eric Romoff all here with me. Matt from DynastyVipers, the rest of us all from FootballDiehards. Evan Tarracciano, the Roto Wizard, is in the draft with us. Emil Kadlec, some of our friends as well. Scott Kobe, the great high stakes master. Some regulars from the chat, Royal Slade, Andrea, Jim Furry, Mr. Scampers, of course, and Dame Overboard all in as well. So we're rolling along nicely. Emil Kadlec has got his 3 quarterbacks. And I want to ask about his third quarterback. Sam Howell seems to suddenly be a polarizing figure for some reason. Does everyone remember what he did his last year of college in terms of running the football? John Laub?
Over 800 yards rushing from North Carolina. Now, he's not an elite athlete, and part of that was because Williams and Michael Carter had left campus, and the North Carolina offense fell apart, so his passing numbers fell, and he probably had to prop up his rushing numbers. But he's efficient with his legs. I could expect 350 yards and 4 touchdowns running, so he does give you some ground game equity, and I like that in this format. but I don't expect him to push 500 yards at the NFL level.
I'm going to go to Jamie just because I've seen the disgust on his face at some recent turns of events. Dealing with the emotion of having players taken out from under you. What is the best way to do that?
Well, Matt Donnelly is not in my division, so I'm not going to have to worry about it as much as it's happening right now. You are killing me this draft. 4 times at least going back. I thought for sure Juwan Johnson would have been there. Yeah, no, like you said, I mean, this is as unpredictable as you guys have been talking about. You might think that you got it all planned out and you got your queue all set, and then someone's going to come and take that player that you thought for sure you were going to get. So, I mean, having the ability to zag at a moment's notice is so important in this draft when you put all these people together with such different draft ideologies there. Yeah, no, I wanted Juwan Johnson there for sure, and I guarantee Mr. Scampers is going to do it again to me right now.
So I want to get some more questions in the chat.
Nope, he didn't. No, it's quarterback. Never mind.
I appreciate y'all coming in on the chat. Yes, Scampers needed another quarterback, and quarterback was landed there. So I wanted to get to some of the questions in the chat. Rick K Jeff wants to know, how much more do you value running backs over wide receivers in this format, Eric?
Quite a bit. This is really the only format where you'll see me going this heavy at running back relative to wide receiver early in the draft, right? Those points per first down go a long way with running backs. Those points per carry go a long way with running backs. And the volume is just so much more clear in terms of the ability to project it for the running back position, right? So for me, I'm getting 2 running backs probably in the first 7 rounds of most formats, whereas here, more than happy to make them 2 of my top 3 picks.
Talked about this a little bit earlier, but Matt, how much attention are you paying to the bye weeks, especially the late season buys? There are a lot of them, and this is pretty important in this format.
It is, and you guys mentioned Josh Allen having one of those buys during the playoffs there and being worried about that, and that's why I kind of made sure to grab Kyler Murray, even though I don't know what the situation is going to be. If Kyler Murray does come back, it's going to be later on the season, and when he's back in the lineup, he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks when it comes to fantasy points per game. So I feel that I've got Josh Allen covered in that scenario. Now, you asked earlier, how do you deal with being sniped and disappointment? Well, for me, being a Raiders fan has prepared me for disappointment all throughout my life. So I have no worry about being sniped and how it can make me feel. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to pay attention to the late round buys. But here's the thing. You have to get to the playoffs before it even matters. So you have to make sure your roster is good enough to get to the playoffs. If you don't get to the playoffs, the late round buys, they don't mean squat.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And, Kyler Murray, week 14 bye, Josh Allen, week 13. So those pieces fit together nicely. Mr. Scampers, Jamie says sometimes he plays nice. In this case, maybe he did. Elijah Moore seems to be rising up, getting a little buzz. Looks like he's a pretty good value here. Mike Gesicki as well, Royal Slade, a little disappointed to miss out on Gesicki, who's maybe, kind of one of those upside plays here late in the draft. In general, let's start in with the kickers, John Laub. What's your approach on kickers in this? And again, if you're in the My Fantasy League, kickers are optional. If you're in a sleeper, you have to have at least one. What's your approach with kickers, John? We do not have a kicker off the board yet. I have not seen. So there's that for the starting point.
No, and I actually have 3 kickers in my queue now. What I've decided in this type of draft with kickers having value, I want my 5 running backs and my 5 wide receivers. After I fill those 2 position requirements that I'm happy with, then I start putting my kickers in the queue. And I'm not against taking Justin Tucker as the very first kicker off the board. I know it's a little risky, and people will tell you shouldn't do that. Oh, there they just went. But I'm okay. I think Justin Tucker is worth taking as that first kicker because he's just so much better than any other kicker in the NFL. He might not score the most fantasy points, but he's almost guaranteed to be in the top 4 at the end of the season. So I'm willing to go Justin Tucker. Now, I did see, there we go, 3 kickers just went off the board. So now I'll have those are the three in my queue. Unfortunately,
I was going to ask.
So now I'm going to have to reevaluate. But I'm not. I like this position to take kickers.
Matt Donnelly, how many kickers might you play on a given week in the flexes?
So, in the past, there was a Scott Fishbowl where I absolutely got decimated by injuries, and I didn't have the ability to go quarterback. So when I sat there, I was like, okay, what do? I literally played 3 kickers one week to advance to the next round of the playoffs because that's what I had to do. So now you add in the fact that you're getting these bonus points for the yardage on these kicks. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you see yourself playing 2 kickers later on the season when these injuries start to add up. So that's one of those things. Don't be too surprised if it happens. But, I mean, I would try not to. 1 maybe the most any given week. But there's going to be times where you're going to have to flex and put kickers into your lineup because that's the best that you got because these waivers are going to be absolutely cleaned out by week 6, week 7.
I blame me for the kicker run, as noted in the chat by Scott Kobe. It started immediately when I mentioned kickers. You're all welcome for that. I try to do my part here as a non-drafter. It's during the pot. So we're in the later rounds, you guys. Jamie, so I've heard different views on how people approach these late rounders. Some people like to handcuff their own players. Some people looking to steal other handcuffs that might give them an edge later in the season. What in general is your approach? I know you just took a guy that I think is such a super awesome value in round 16, took Isaiah Hodgins, who I still think might well be the wide receiver 1, not named Darren Waller for the Giants. But that aside, how are you, what's kind of your approach with these late round players? What is it you're looking for? What possibilities?
I think, you want that short list of guys who you are kind of, bent on their upside with respect to their cost. Like Hodgins is definitely one of mine. Rashid Shaheed, who Eric took, I was hoping to get on the way back in that last round there. Those are 2 guys that I've been heavily targeting late just because of the situation they're in, at the cost they're coming. He's free right now. They're all free. It's my wide receiver 6, who could very well be in my lineup every week just because of what they bring to the table. So, I mean, getting that list, maybe taking your shots on some of the rookie wide receivers. There's still one in my queue. Oh, nope, not anymore. John just took him.
I like him.
Yep. Those rookie wide receivers, guessing the right one there, I think has a lot of bearing. And then the kickers. Like I said at the beginning, I never take kickers, even in this format. But with 3.3 for an extra point instead of 1, I think that's a significant enough scoring change. And the thing that I'm actually looking at that I want to kind of go off of is whether or not Justin Tucker is actually my kicker 1, so to speak. I mean, he's good for hitting the field goals from anywhere on the field, but I like Butker there because if the Chiefs score 4 touchdowns, those extra points I got from Butker are as many as 2 long Tucker field goals. And the Chiefs offense is going to do something like that. So I'm still kind of in the process of ranking kickers at that point. But I think the high-powered offenses are the ones to target there for the extra points, not just the field goals.
I
can't wait till we start talking about quarterback kicker stacks. I think that's going to be one of those things.
There you go.
The Patrick Mahomes,
I think Jamie already is.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about it. You get the touchdown, the Patrick Mahomes touchdown. There's your 6 points plus. Then you get the Harrison Butker field goal after. Then you get the timeout by Jamie on his next pick. I mean, all you have to do is talk about stacking kickers with quarterbacks, and you got Jamie distracted.
You did. You blew my mind there with all the kicker talk. I had a cue, thank goodness. So I got the guy I wanted.
Blew my mind with the kicker talk.
But is that not a fair point, though? Is that not a fair point, though? Is that something maybe worth consideration? Eric Romoff, would you consider that? You got a quarterback, and you're looking at late rounds, and you're looking at kickers. Will that maybe be a factor for you?
To an extent, for me, it's more so just kind of the scoring propensity offense overall. That kickers like Butker and Tucker right next to each other. I tend to think, and most books out there would agree, that Kansas City is just going to do more scoring on offense than Baltimore will, and that's very much so going to be a significant tiebreaker, right? Jamie hit the nail on the head, right? Like, we need to remove the fact that a extra point is worth a single fantasy point, right? An extra point is now a significant scoring event in the context of this very deep format. So going for the kickers that have or that are on a high-scoring offense is going to be a premium. And hopefully, if I'm doing it right, the quarterbacks that I've drafted are also on those high-scoring offenses.
Dame Overboard going for the rare Zay stack, Flowers and Jones there. Well done. And we'll get through this draft and we'll kind of hit everybody and kind of get some final thoughts here. I have plenty of time. We're only going through 18 rounds. The real draft will be 22, but just wanted to kind of see how some of these teams played out and have a little time to discuss them with the panel here, as you look across the screen, as you stare at your screen. To my right, Matt Donnelly from DynastyVipers, Jamie Calandro from FootballDiehards, and John Laub from FootballDiehards, Eric Romoff from FootballDiehards, also in the draft, Roto Wizard, Evan Tarracciano from FootballDiehards, Emil Kadlec's in the draft, Scott Kobe as well, Mr. Scampers, Dame Overboard always does a great job in these drafts, so appreciate it very much. Same with Jim Furry, who did a great job. Andrea, always crushing it. Royal Slade, fantastic job as well. Really appreciate everybody's time and effort. So as we sit back, I'll just go through each of you guys and kind of get your takes and let you hit on any subjects you haven't yet, but also, comment on your teams and any teams that you see that really appeal to you. Matt Donnelly, please begin.
Well, yeah, the first thing I want to say is when you're looking at these drafts and you're in your SFB group chats, you're in your division chats, don't be afraid to kind of go and take a look at and learn your opponents and what they like to do. For example, I know John, he loves his college players. He's going to draft college players. So when I go into my Scott Fishbowl, knowing that John's at the 10 spot, I can expect him to go for some young rookies because John loves his college guys. You mentioned that it's not hard for anyone, especially guys who are analysts. All you have to do is go into the Twitter feed for like 30 seconds, and you'll find out that, hey, I'm a big Darnell Mooney fan. I'm a big Christian Kirk fan. It's not hard to figure this out. So if you're going into your draft, you put some research into the guys you're playing against as much as you would into your actual knowledge of the fantasy players in general, right? Your rankings you're going to put so much work into. Well, put some of that work into understanding who your league mates are. I think Leo was one of the guys there on Twitter that mentioned the notebook. And that's one of those good things when you go into the SFB, understanding who you are going into. And sometimes they post their mock drafts like silly people, and you can literally see who they're taking from their spot. So you have a pretty good understanding ahead of time. But when I look at these drafts here, I don't hate what Scampers is doing because we talk about if you can't get C.J. Stroud as your second quarterback, guess what? It's not going to be Ryan Tannehill that's going to be a second quarterback. It's probably going to be George Kittle in a tight end premium because he's going to score as much as Ryan Tannehill any given week from the tight end position. So you're almost drafting a tight end to be your second quarterback, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So I don't hate what Scampers was doing here because he did something where you're like, okay, he's got the 3 tight ends here, all top-end tight ends, arguably top 6 tight ends here, especially when you look at the scoring, which is going to help him move forward. I'm not a big fan of waiting on the quarterback position. Bob, you talked about how it makes us squirm, not having it. But you look at it, I'm like, I don't hate what he did because he backed it up with a tight end position there that's going to act as his quarterback moving forward.
Jamie, so in your cheers, Scott Fishbowl regalia, you will be drafting live in Boston. So look forward to that. Matt, are you drafting live or online?
I'm drafting online because apparently, it's hard to get a bunch of people in Canada. We've got this huge country, but all our population's kind of spread out along the border, which makes it a little bit more difficult to get everyone together. So it's really difficult. I wouldn't mind flying down to Vegas and catching it, doing a live draft down there. But for me, it's probably not going to happen in a live draft. I'm in the Reese's division there with Travis May and some other great minds. So it's going to be fun that way doing it online. I'm not a very patient drafter. I'll admit this right off the get-go. And one of the things that drives me nuts, I know they're a slow draft, but slow drafts, there's nothing better than a live draft, right? Because everything's coming, it's going, it's fluid. And sometimes, I don't know about you, Bob, but there's so many voices in my head that if I have too much time to think, I'm going to screw myself up one way or the other. I'm going to overthink decisions, and that's what's going to happen. So I feel like you draft better live than we do on these slow drafts, and I will be doing a slow draft, so good Lord help me now.
You're destroyed. Jamie, your approach heading into this one, you did draft from your spot, the 1-3. What are you looking for? Is it you and Scott in the same draft? You and Scott Kobe?
Scott, Kobe, and I are in the same draft. He's in the one spot in the Cheers draft though. So I don't know if he learned more about me than I did about him. I'm seeing the wide receiver heavy approach from him there. The thing about this draft that I'm kind of learning here is that if you look at mine, I stayed true to how I draft in these things. I go running back heavy anyway. And there was the question before about running backs over receivers. Add that point per carry thing, and you do it even more. I get 4 running backs in the first 7 rounds, and that's probably how you're going to see me draft unless some big shakeup happens. But I like Scott's team. I think, I'm not comfortable waiting on running back that long, especially in this one. But I mean, if you look at his 4 wide receivers, the fact that he still got Connor Montgomery and Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson just to kind of handcuff Herbert or whatever you want to call it in that Bears situation, I think that's a really good job with the waiting on running back crowd. I think Evan in the first position did a good job waiting on running back too. So, I might try that in a couple of mocks just to see. I don't think I'm going to change at this point with how much I value running backs in general. And, if you look at Matt's, we basically drafted the same the same team there. So I'm very thankful he's not in the 4th spot in my Cheers division.
By the way, Dame, actually, it was a trifecta on the Zays because she added Isaiah Likely. You see what she did there. John Laub, you're drafting online, right, John? Tell us a little bit about what your approach is going to be and some of the things you saw in this draft that might help you.
First, I want to mention Jim's team. I think what number drafting out of the 7th spot. I find it fascinating because it's not what I would be comfortable doing. Jefferson and Cup though.
Good, huh?
Yeah, like that's one heck of a start. But what really, to me, built the roster for him, he took some risk, and I think in the Scott Fish Bowl, if you're going to not draft quarterbacks, you're going to have to embrace risk. And I think going double tapping in the 4th and 5th rounds with Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford, I like that risk. Yes, you get the Rams hook up, and we mostly think the Rams are not good, so game script says they should be throwing the football a lot in the second half. So I love that. I believe that Russell Wilson will have a bounce-back season. I don't necessarily know if he'll ever be as efficient as he was in Seattle, but I do think he'll be better. I mean, can he be worse than last year? So I think that's pretty good. And then to get Ramondre Stevenson and Dameon Pierce, those are pretty nice. As long as Dalvin Cook doesn't interfere with Stevenson, I think he's really good there. So I wanted to shout out to that. I practice what I would hope happens in the Scott Fish Bowl. I am doing it online. I got 2 quarterbacks in the first rounds. What I've discovered in just the mocks, Matt has mentioned it, it could all go awry. But what I like in the 4th round now is Geno Smith and Daniel Jones. I think Geno Smith's efficiency throwing the ball, and look up his advanced stats last year. You can look at the touchdowns, yards, and all that, and fantasy points. But if you dig deeper, Geno Smith was unbelievable last year throwing the football. So I love him. Then the other one is Daniel Jones. He had over 700 yards rushing. I still believe he's going to be very good with his legs. You're getting yards per carry at the quarterback position. So my goal, I'll watch the quarterbacks closely. I'm very comfortable getting Geno Smith or Daniel Jones in the 4th round. And then I'm just going to draft 7 receivers. And that's what I did to finish out the wide receiver room.
Yeah, so looking at the filling in that Romoff gridiron scholar sandwich, Emil Kadlec. I'm sorry I said it like that. I like the way his team ended up. I like that Justin Herbert, Hawkinson, Daniel Jones to start. I'm huge on Jahmyr Gibbs in this range. Like the receivers he got with some upside. Dobbins at that point. Tyler Lockett, Howling Steel where he went. I like the Sam Howell as 3rd quarterback. A lot to like about that lineup. Eric Romoff, what's to like about your lineup and just in general takeaways that you've learned? I think you're drafting online, sir, correct?
I am drafting online. I'm drafting out of the 12 spot, so I'm trying to take prime advantage that third round reversal. So kind of out of my comfort zone here in the 8th seat, and I've ended up with a team that looks almost nothing like any other teams that I've mocked so far. Definitely, kind of fun to different view. First and foremost, shout out to you, shout out to the diehard faithful. We have put together a very sharp mock draft here. You mentioned the sandwich, and like I was in a prize hit and watching guys just evaporate from my queue, and guys willing to reach on a little bit. So definitely a sharp audience that we were playing with today. Kind of goes back to Matt's point, right? Know who you are drafting with, know how much they are attuned to the research, how much they are attuned to the scoring format. And I think that format really shows itself, right? We had 2 teams out of our 12 with 2 quarterbacks through 3 rounds. We had 2 more with 2 quarterbacks through 4 rounds, right? You go back to last year, and the vast majority of teams had their second quarterback coming out of the 3rd or 4th round, right? So I do think that people are starting to really consume the information that's out there and adjust their strategy accordingly. And I think that at least here and between the time between now and when I draft, I'm probably actually going to experiment a little bit with going back to 2 quarterbacks early and see how that team comes together, right? I want to try a little bit of a pivot there and see if I can still get value. And judging by teams like Jim's, judging by teams like Evan Tarracciano's, sitting a little bit later on your first running back, on your first wide receiver, you're still able to put pretty strong rosters. So I'll probably head out of this draft with and do more and a few different approaches overall.
Yeah, I think, and just by the way, Evan Tarracciano will be doing a write-up of this mock draft, and I think in the coming chat, when it's done, we'll put the link to that article here in the chat for anyone who is here and wanted to go back and look at that and relive this draft, review this draft. I learned a lot because I didn't have to show my hand. I feel like I had a great advantage, but seriously, what Matt said is true. If you're in the Scott Fishbowl, go out and make sure you're in your group chats and keep an eye on them. People are throwing out mocks constantly, getting your pick draft, right? Like so every pick has a chat. If you're the 111 like me, I mean, you can find a chat that's 111 and get yourself installed in there. I think there's some tweets floating around out there. You can hunt them down, do a search. They give you the people running all those chats, so make sure you're in them. I will be drafting live in Dallas on July 15th. Wingstop. Jamie and I repping it up nicely in our Scott Fishbowl merch. Go out and buy some merch. Get involved in the Scott Fishbowl. All the proceeds go to Fantasy Cares, great organization, great charitable effort. Again, 3,300 teams. The fantasy community comes together like no other for these kind of events, and the Scott Fishbowl has kind of come to be the epitome of this, right? I mean, where we're all just everybody's on board. I don't know anyone who doesn't think this is a great idea, who doesn't want to be part of it and doesn't want to get involved. We see people scrambling for invites, and a great job by Scott and his team, John Bosch, Alan H., all Bob Gilchrist. I'm leaving people off, and I feel stupid for doing that, so I don't want to do that. But great job by all of the people doing the organizing. They did just a fantastic job of putting it all together. Mr. Scamper's in that 102's chat there. Watch out for him. He's dangerous. I'm telling you. Very dangerous. All right, everybody. Really appreciate you coming. Thanks, everyone. Evan, Mr. Scampers, Jamie, Matt Donnelly, Dame, Scott Kobe, Jim Furry. Great draft by you. Eric Romoff, Emil Kadlec, the Gridiron Scholar. Andrea, I don't want to butcher your last name. Stislowski? Did I just say that right, Andrea? Tell me I did. That would make me very excited. And Royal Slade, of course, my good pal up north on the northern portion of the continent with Matt Donnelly. They do a great job holding things down up there. Kudos to them. And a great draft by everyone. Really appreciate your time. I will be back here Wednesday. We're on the hot seat, and we may discuss some more Scott Fish things then, but we'll definitely take more of your questions and get into all of that. So thanks again, everyone, for coming, everyone who took part. Really appreciate you. We know you all have a choice of what kind of content you consume. We appreciate you consuming this content. It's great. We love you. Goodbye.